Reciprocal imitation training lets our students know that what they are doing and saying is important. Today, I had a wonderful conversation with Dr. Jessica Osos. She is a PhD level BCBAD, and she is a wealth of information on all things naturalistic interventions. She currently oversees the Primary Children's Hospital inaugural early intervention ABA clinic in Riverton, Utah, which I love. We talk all about how they're working with speech therapists, occupational therapists, and ABA, which, I'm a big fan of all that collaboration. On today's episode, you are going to learn all about reciprocal imitation training. What is reciprocal imitation training? What are some steps and play expansions that you can start using in your own therapy environment? So we discuss very specific play expansions that you can use as a therapist. I think sometimes in this idea of let's use some structured teaching, let's use some naturalistic interventions, it can be hard to know, well, what exactly do you mean? What toys are you using, Jessica? What are you using in your clinic, and how are you actually working on this? How are you taking data on things that are more naturalistic? I love this topic. We discussed this in the ABA Speech Connection, our membership for speech therapists, BCBAs, and RBTs. And one of my newest courses, Naturalistic Interventions Next Steps. We talk exactly about these things. I can't wait to get into this conversation today.
I'm Rose Griffin, a speech therapist, board-certified behavior analyst, and founder of ABA Speech. It wasn't all that long ago that I felt overwhelmed by providing therapy for my autistic students and any students who were not yet speaking. Fast forward through many doubts, tears, research, and courses, and you will see the framework that I use today and share with over 60,000 readers weekly. One that will help you support your students and feel more confident in the process. I created the ABA Speech podcast to give you simple, step-by-step strategies to help you reach all of your students wherever they are on their communication journeys. If you're a speech therapist, BCBA, RBT student, or parent who's looking to help all students develop a way to communicate with the world, you are in the right place, friend. Let's get started.
Today, we have a great conversation with Dr. Jessica Osos. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's happy to be here.
I'm really excited about our conversation today. We're going to talk about a couple things, but we're really going to talk about reciprocal imitation training. And I feel like it's something that I discuss in the ABA Speech Connection. We have a membership for speech therapists and BCBAs and RBTs. And I talk about reciprocal imitation training in our Start Communicating Today course, and also a course where I talk about NDBI / naturalistic interventions. And I feel like it's not an area that we just have discussed ever on the podcast in over 200 episodes. So when I saw you kind of marketing this course that you're doing, I was like, oh, I need to talk to this person. And so I think I maybe reached out on LinkedIn, which I always give a shout out to. If you're a BCBA or a speech therapist, LinkedIn isn't it a great place to connect with other people?
I definitely echo that. I think that's a great place to connect. I'm starting to work on a clinical quality paper right now too, and I connected with Dr. and Krista Byra through that too. So I think LinkedIn is like such a good platform to get more information and also to network as well.
It's nice because it is social media, but it's like a professional form of social media. So a lot of people that I've had on the podcast, especially BCBAs, I have met over on LinkedIn, and it's not like a weird Instagram DM. It's just it's like, oh, hi, I do this and you do that, and let's talk. So thanks for responding. You've done a lot of really cool things in your career. And can you tell us just a little bit about how you got into the field, and I guess how you knew you wanted to get your PhD as well? Because that's a lot of school. I remember when because I'm dually certified as a speech therapist and BCBA. And after I took that BCBA exam, my daughter was 1. I have 3 kids now. And I remember my husband saying, "You're not going to go back to school, are you?" Because I was just like, I'd put my daughter to bed and then I would do the BDS module. Shout out BDS. I love the BDS team. And, it was hard. And so he was like, "You're not going to do any more school." And I was like, "No, I'm not." But then I started a small business. So, there's that.
Yeah, so much work.
So much.
It with something else.
Yeah, so much work. But I guess I like to do things. I don't know. But I guess tell us a little bit about how you got into the field and then how you knew you wanted to go on and get your PhD, because it's a lot of work.
Yeah, so I actually started off my undergrad majoring in theater, so quite a different route that I ended up going. And so I went to like a high school, like a theater high school, and so during my undergrad, I had gone back to visit some teachers there, and I also grew up with my uncle with Down syndrome. He lived with my immediate family, so he was more like my brother kind of growing up, and I went back to visit a high school theater teacher. And he was like, I'm sure you want to go into theater. Like, you have something special with like giving back to the community and like this, like, and people with disabilities. And so the world might need you. And so just consider it. And so that really kind of touched me, and I did go back that next semester and change my major. I still minored in theater, and so I was still productive, but I changed my major to special education. And then my senior year of college, I actually connected with Dr. Joshua Plavnik over at Michigan State University, and I worked on a research project with him with like Head Sprout early readers, and so through that, I kind of got more into ABA specifically and research, and that's kind of where that interest grew. I ended up still getting my teacher certification, but then I didn't teach after that. I went right back to school and got my master's in ABA. Dr. Plavnik really kind of was a person that convinced me to go back in that. I had, again, kind of a special interest in that. But I had never done ABA before I started my master's program. I had ran a summer camp for children on the spectrum, but I had never actually done like strict ABA. And I remember back when I was running the summer camp, at one point there was a BCBA saying like, what was the contingency for this behavior? And I had no knowledge of ABA, so I was just like, I don't even know what this person's saying.
Yes. What's that? Say that again, huh? Yeah.
So I kind of went a little blind into my master's program, and MSU set up in a hybrid setting. And so if you're doing their hybrid model, you work on site at their ABA clinic. So I kind of hit the ground running. There's multiple BCBADs on site there. Yeah. You have like Dr. Joshua Plavnik at the time. There was also Dr. Kate Lalonde was overseeing the clinic. She was the clinical director at the time. And so that was kind of hit the ground running there. And I was required to do a thesis for that program. Oh, wow. And that's where that interest for research really grew. And then I went out to the field. I was a BCBA for companies back in Michigan for about 3 years. Mm-hmm. And I really kind of missed that touching base with research. And like, although I could read it, I really missed like being able to contribute to that area. So that's what sparked the interest in going back for your PhD, or my PhD. And then for where I kind of chose, I did my thesis on activity schedules. And so it kind of made sense to come to Utah State University to complete my PhD. And so I finished that up in May of this year with Dr. Tom Higbee. And on that note, like Dr. Matt Broadhead was also kind of a person that encouraged me to come to Utah State. He studied under Dr. Higbee as well. So okay. There's so many connections in the ABA world.
I had him on the show, Dr. Broadhead, and I love him. He wrote this article about collaborating with non-behavioral colleagues, and I use that. It's almost 10 years old now, but I use that article in almost every ethics training I do because I used to teach.
Just as relevant.
Yeah, it is just as relevant because there's nowhere else out there to say like, okay, let's use this research-backed framework on how to really just like get on the same page. And so it was so cool to have him on. I remember he said Utah State because last year I had him on the fall. My family, we live in Ohio, but we went to St. George, Utah last year. And that was the first time we've ever gone to Utah. And we went to Zion. And I just am like, blah, blah, blah. I'm obsessed with Utah. So I remember reading your bio and seeing that. Isn't it just the most beautiful state? Like, isn't it so cool?
Yeah. It convinced me to stay here. So
yes. Oh my god,
PhD and back out in the clinical world. But yes.
Oh man, I'm so jealous. If you haven't been to Utah, gotta go. I love that. So today we're going to talk about reciprocal imitation training. And so this is something we've discussed in some of the courses that we have in the ABA Speech Connection, because when I was doing research, I like to contact research so that I can read it and then tell people about it, because sometimes when you're a treating clinician, it's hard to stay in touch with the literature. So thank you for doing research. But can you share with us a general definition of what reciprocal imitation training is?
Yeah, so it's a naturalistic developmental behavior intervention, so an NDBI, and it's designed to teach young children to imitate spontaneously through ongoing social interaction. So there's really this focus on teaching a naturalistic play context, while also an emphasis on back and forth interaction with that child. It's child-led because that's just like a core caveat of NDBIs, and it really kind of teaches across domains and like social communication skills in general. So beyond even imitation as well.
And what I was surprised about is that a lot of people don't know what it is. I feel like there's a lot of people who are certified. I mean, I definitely, as a speech language pathologist, would not have heard of reciprocal imitation training. I feel like it's definitely something when I was researching, putting together the courses that are based on NDBI and the ABA speech connection. It's something that I was just researching and I came across it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. But I think the speech therapist tuning in, it will definitely be new. And I think for a lot of BCBAs, it's new. Do you find that to be true as well?
I would agree. I think I have a very lucky experience of being able to say I did my field work hours at Michigan State's clinic. And so while Dr. Kate Lalonde was there, she worked pretty closely, I believe, with Dr. Brooke Ingersoll, who created Reciprocal Imitation Training. And so I think one of the publications that Dr. Ingersoll has published, Dr. Lalonde was on as well. So I was very lucky in that sense of getting that training at Michigan State and just again, because I was so blind to the field, I just assumed this is what everyone was doing. But when I went out into the field, it was very obvious that not a lot of people know what it is.
Yes. And we've had Brooke on the show too in season 1 or 2, I think, to talk about Project Impact. Does that make sense?
Yes. That sounds right.
Yes. And so they were on, and that was a really good episode. And we'll link that one in the show notes because she's just great. Like, does all this research, but is like, comes on the show and is like very easy to talk to. Like, I was like, wow, this is great. Because you hear these names when you start to do research for things, you like see the same names over and over again, or look them up on ResearchGate, which is also nice to see research. So, okay, that's cool. Yeah. You get out into the real world and you're like, oh man, not everybody knows all these things because you were in some really awesome places for your training and your coursework. So I love that. That's so cool. So what are the key components of reciprocal imitation training?
And that'd be pretty obvious, but the first one's reciprocal imitation. Yes. So both actions and vocalizations. And so one of the key components is that because it's child-led, that child's leading the session, right? And you're going to be imitating what that child's doing, both their actions and their vocalization. So even if they're pre-verbal and engaging in like stereotypy, you're imitating exactly what they're doing, and you're just kind of cueing them in of like, your actions and what you're saying are important and they're interesting to me, right? And so the reciprocal piece comes in because the guide for reciprocal imitation training is that about every minute or so, the teacher or the instructor should then present a model for an imitation trial for that child as well. And so that's where you see that reciprocation piece of the instructors imitating the child, but then they're also providing some opportunities to imitate their actions as well.
Okay, interesting. And isn't there some research that says, and I don't know, I feel like I read that students might be more attuned to the session when an adult is imitating something the student has done versus some of those antiquated do this trials that we may see with arbitrary gross motor imitation. Not to say that those are all wrong, but is there research to say that that's true?
That I'm not super familiar on, but if you said that, I would believe it.
Yeah, right.
It makes sense, right? It may
right.
Like when you say it like that, it does make sense of like this kid cares what you're doing because you're imitating them and you're making it about what they're doing as well.
Right.
So I don't know a specific citation, but yeah.
Okay. And I love the idea of kind of validating what you're doing and saying is important, because if you spend any time on social media, which I feel like you have with some of the marketing I've seen that you're doing for some of your courses that are coming up, that you see that that's really important. And that is something that a lot of people who don't understand the science of ABA would think that that's not something that we're doing in ABA, although we are. And I think by this talking about this intervention and kind of bringing it to light and saying like, this is something you could really plan for in your sessions, that we are saying that what that student's doing is important. And child-led interventions can be very important and valid and are something that we do in the field, correct?
It's not haphazard teaching, right? It's still meaningful and it's still intentional. It's just a different way to approach similar skills. Some other kind of components that go into it are like linguistic mapping, or like I call it sports casting, or like narrating play, right? There's so many different things to call it. But basically you're just narrating what that child and you are doing while you're playing and while you're imitating. So instead of just imitating quietly and just imitating their vocalizations, you're also narrating. And some keys for this is just making sure that you simplify your language, you stress important words, be repetitive. And then one thing, actually, I had one of our SLPs here at Primary Children's Hospital do a training for our RBTs last week, and she kind of gave me this language. I would say expand language, but she called it copy and add. So like basically you engage in a echoic, right? So if the kid's saying car, you're going to say car, but then you're going to add something, right? So we're going to say like red car or car go. And I think copy and add is a really easy way to remember that while you're kind of in the moment with that child.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, that's right. I was going to ask you about that. So you bring that up, and that's great that there's a speech therapist there. So can you tell us a little bit about the program or the work that you're doing at Primary Children's Hospital? I think it's called Inaugural Early Intervention ABA Clinic. Is that right in my research? So there's speech therapists. Can you kind of just tell us what work you guys are doing there? It sounds cool.
Yeah, so I'm the behavior analyst supervisor for Primary Children's Hospital's inaugural ABA clinic. And so we're a portion of Intermountain Health, the children's health portion of it. And we opened our early intensive behavior intervention clinic in Riverton, Utah, back in February of this year. And it's been a really exciting year for Primary Children's because they have a program called the Primary Promise. And so from this, they're putting a focus on autism services, with ABA being one of those expansions. So they already had OT, they already had speech services that were available to kids on the spectrum, but this was kind of an expansion to that. And so we have a clinical team of me, 2 other BCBAs, and then Dr. Casey Clay is the director of ABA services. So he kind of oversees all of ABA because we're hoping to kind of expand ethically in the future. But our focus right now is really developing and implementing systems to ensure high quality implementation of ABA services in our first clinic here.
That's amazing. Okay, so they had OT, they had speech, so they're adding in ABA. So that's interesting because at the ABA Speech Connection, we have SLPs, BCBAs, and RBTs, and we've had some very large healthcare groups join the connection, this idea of learning together and having this one kind of focus. And that's been really cool to have these clinical roundtables I do for some of the different locations. And some of these larger organizations are really focused on also expanding, but also expanding ethically and making sure that everybody's feeling well trained and the intervention's effective and all those things. That's awesome. So it feels like all the research that you're doing and especially with reciprocal imitation training, these are things that you're really implementing right now with the students you're working with. So that's really...
Yeah, I am scientist practitioner for sure. I have my own caseload, so I'm still like in touch with patients and families. Yeah. But yeah, it's been really fun and really trying to, in the next year, promote that collaboration between speech OT and ABA.
Oh, I love that. That's very cool. Okay, so let's say that somebody is thinking like, wow, reciprocal imitation training, like I've never really thought about that. Like I've always just been somebody who's been working on imitation training where the clinician does something, the student does it after us, and I really want to start embedding this into my intervention. Can you share some ways, maybe some specific examples that we could start doing this in therapy?
Yeah. And one thing to start with is I don't think it has to be a this or that, right? Like we can work on imitation skills in this DTT setting with specific SDs with do this. But RIT kind of expands it, right? We're not just teaching imitation when we're doing reciprocal imitation training. We're teaching social communication skills in general. So it's that share and take interaction between the child and the therapist. It's also teaching like joint attention skills and language and things beyond. And so we always kind of think like take that zoom out of just observational learning in general. And this really helps that like more spontaneous imitation as well, because there's not specific SDs of like do this when those trials are presented during RIT. And so if you are wanting to do it, the first thing I would say is identify that child's current developmental play level or play skill level. And you want to use RIT at that level or like stretch it like one beyond, right? So in the NDBI literature, you can find they've defined every level of developmental play. Figure out where your kid is and start there and expand from there. And really trying to expand play skills and encourage social communication. And so one way to kind of expand those play skills is like think about how you can increase the variety of toys that they play with. Maybe you're increasing the variety of actions that they're playing with their favorite toy with. So maybe you're not thinking about like, let's throw a different toy in the mix, but let's take this toy that you really like and show you some different play schemas with it or different actions that you can do with that same toy. You can expand play sequences. So maybe if they are really like the baby doll and they're always like burping the baby, we can then show them that whole routine, right? Of like, oh, we're going to rock the baby, we'll feed the baby, we'll burp the baby. But kind of just expanding that sequence as well and really focused on increasing complexity over time.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I have the NDBI book, the gray book that I always tell people, like, I read this whole thing last summer and made a 5-hour course. So, you know, if you don't have time to read the whole graduate level book, I did that for you. Oh, yeah. So they do have that whole section on play skills. And actually, that's what's been so cool. I'm on the board for a company called Cicero Therapy, and Dr. Carol Westby, who is a PhD level SLP, who came up with some of the play skills and does a lot of research in that area. And they talk about her play skills and scales in that NDBI book. I'm just on like some Zoom meetings with her and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's a celebrity. Like this is like everybody's, when you talk about where they're at in their play skills, like that's really the research that they're discussing from her. So it's been so cool to be with somebody who has created something that's just across the field that everybody's looking at. That is a really cool, and I'll link, we have a course, it's called Naturalistic Interventions Next Steps, that talks about NDBI and also just talks about ways that we can implement it into our therapy. So I try to read every chapter of the book and then make it into like real world ways that we could start to do things. If we're not a company, if your company is going to get you certified in early start dental model or project impact or all those things that you're certified in, that's awesome. But a lot of places you're not going to be able to get that high level of certification and training. And so this is kind of that next best thing of like how to extract some of those functional things like you're talking about. And I love that idea of play expansions. We actually had a really cool BCBA on. Her name's Maggie Haraberta. She's out of Philadelphia and she has a cool Instagram called Unfurling Little. She is an autistic BCBA and she came on and talked about just what you're talking about, like play expansions and how to maybe start with things and playing with them in a different way. And so, what are your thoughts on, so let's say that you're doing the baby doll, because I've definitely done that when I was seeing clients in home. I always made sure I had like 2 baby dolls or 2 of things. Is that something that you recommend? Because that's something I try to train people on, is like, kids don't want us to touch their stuff, right? And so do you recommend that?
So with RIT, that is one of the foundations, right? You want to have 2 copies of everything. So even if it's not like a succinct play set, but it's multiple different toys, you want to make sure you have 2 copies, because you want to make sure that you can present that ongoing model and that you don't have to put that toy down in order for the child to then imitate what you're doing, right? Beyond just, you don't want to take the kid's toy away to show them what to do with it, right? Right. Beyond that, it also kind of gives that ongoing imitation model as well.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so I feel like there's so many different, so you mentioned baby dolls. Can you think of like maybe 1 or 2 other play kind of expansions or toys that you like to use in your clinic that are popular with your clients?
The baby dolls are always a go-to. We have like vet sets, so like a little like crate with all the little doctors or vet supplies, and animals. I love to do like a kitchen play sequence as well, like cooking on the stove, things like that. We also really like the ice cream sets from like Melissa and Doug, or we even got like a cheaper one on Amazon at the clinic I work at now, and it works just as well. I'm trying to think of other ones. And any of like the little people play sets are great. And I think for those ones, you don't need like you don't need 2 copies of the actual set, but maybe 2 copies of the figures might be helpful. Yes. So kind of getting creative in that sense of, we could use the same maybe scene, but have 2 copies of the things we actually need to manipulate.
And then for your data collection, and I know that Dr. Tracy Ralston, she came on the show like maybe in episode 1. She's really great. I'm not sure if you know her, but she's another great person I think you'd love to connect with if you don't know her personally. I think she's out of Texas. She does a lot of good work in NDBI, but I think she has an article out about taking data in these more naturalistic settings. But are you taking data on the amount of things that the student imitates, or is it like a set duration of time and you're seeing how many things they've imitated? I know a lot of BCBAs are out here thinking like, well, how do we take data on something like that?
It's overwhelming.
It's tricky. It's tricky. I mean, speech therapists are more like, I'm overgeneralizing now, but I feel like speech therapists are more naturalistic just from our training. And it's for BCBAs, I think it's harder for us to, we know what natural environment teaching is, which is different, than what we're talking about today. But do you have any just kind of thoughts on getting started with the data collection? Because I feel like a lot of BCBAs might be feeling anxious about what that would look like.
Yeah, I think the easiest thing to collect data on is when you're presenting imitation trials, the level of prompting that's needed for them to imitate. And so one thing to note is you'll present the model 3 times before prompting. So say you're doing like rock baby, the kid's playing with the baby, you do rock baby. And then if they don't imitate, you're going to give it a couple seconds and then you're going to present again. And then on that third presentation, you might block what they're playing with to make sure that they have, to ensure better attending. And then you're going to represent one more time and then you'll prompt them. So I think like level of prompting for those models is probably the easiest intro level to take data on. But I'd also say it kind of depends on like the purpose of why you're doing reciprocal imitation training too, right? Because you could also look at like number of spontaneous play actions that they're doing or like novel actions that they're doing with that play set. Maybe it's, are they responding to joint attention? Maybe it's, are they initiating joint attention? So it kind of depends on what you're trying to get out of it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's good just to discuss these things because I know a lot of people, if they're not in a program that is incorporating more naturalistic interventions, they're thinking about like, how can I get started on this? And these are things that I know BCBAs and speech therapists have questions about. Okay, this was super informative. Where can people find out more about you and your work?
So I am most active on LinkedIn. I do a monthly CEU on Behavior Live, so you can check that to see. I just did the one on reciprocal imitation training earlier this month, actually last week. So that's on demand on Behavior Live. I do have Instagram, but I'm horrible at keeping it updated. I try to check it weekly just in case I get messages, but LinkedIn's probably the best place.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the show. It was great to connect.
Thank you. I appreciate it.